All right, what's up, y'all? It's your girl Malika here, and I'm super excited for another episode of From the Block podcast because this next topic that we're about to cover is really important and very near and dear to my heart. And as you can see, it's a full house today. So, in case you've been living under a rock, femicide, domestic violence against women, is very prevalent, especially in our community. And this is just a really important topic that we're going to be covering today because not only are we going to educate and inform you all, but we're going to be providing really meaningful resources in case you or a loved one are in a situation that you all need help. So I'm super excited because like I said, this is a packed house today. So I'm about to introduce you guys. We have Rosa. We have Stephanie, and joining us via Zoom, we have Chioma. So let's make some noise, everybody. Yay!
Hey.
Okay, so one by one, you guys are going to introduce yourself. So starting with Rosa.
So I'm Rosa James. I've been doing domestic violence and sexual violence work since 2012. I started out in Florida and now I'm here. I have a research company and evaluation company called Sania's Place LLC. It's named after my line sister's daughter, her first daughter. And I also am a PhD candidate at the Whitney M. Young School of Social Work at Clark Atlanta University. So I've been on court TV. I've done a lot of speaking engagements, and I also do expert testimony about domestic violence and sexual violence and child abuse. So that is, uh, you know,
It's a little bit. It's
yeah,
okay. We're
but
gonna
it's
we're
more.
gonna get
But
into
that,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Lloyd. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at the Women's Resource Center to End Domestic Violence. And I have not been in this work quite as long as Rosa, but I've been working at the Women's Resource Center for about a year, helping with some of our outreach initiatives and connecting with the public. I'm also an actor part-time, so I like to get out and do the public speaking engagements and just raise awareness about this really important topic.
Yeah. Chioma.
And hi, I'm Chioma Brown. I'm a registered nurse, and I'm actually in my last few semesters of my BSN at West Coast. Um, I am a DV survivor and advocate. Um, I like to counsel women or just advocate for women. I speak very openly and freely on my platform at the Pretty Nurse underscore Chi about my experiences. The red flags, things to look for, how to get resources. And I have spoken very open about my ongoing case with Fulton County with my abuser and what it looks like to advocate for yourself through that and get justice for yourself. So.
So starting with Stephanie. So what are some reasons why abuse victims prevent themselves from leaving?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And there are so many factors that go into, why somebody would maybe feel safer staying. And there's a hope there sometimes that you hope the relationship is going to get better. There's something called a sunk cost bias where, like, if you invest all your time and your devotion into a relationship, that even if it's hurting you, you think, okay, well, there are some good times too. Like, your brain tries to protect you. But, love shouldn't hurt. Love shouldn't hurt. And sometimes that abuse cycle is a cycle. It's cyclical, where there's like an incident will happen. And then after that, there's a period of reconciliation. Baby, I'm so sorry. I promise I'll change. Then there's a period of calm, like a honeymoon phase, and you think, okay, well, maybe things aren't so bad. Maybe I am overreacting. You start to talk yourself out of it. But then inevitably there's this period where tension will build and then another incident will happen. And, sometimes it's like years will go by between incidents, or somebody won't really show their true colors until years after you're already married. Or, but sometimes it's not a cycle. Sometimes it's more of a slow collapse.
Yeah.
Like things are good and then gradually they get worse. It's like what's the analogy? Like the frog in the boiling water or whatever. Wait, I'm mixing my analogies. But
I've heard
like
of that.
where if something gets worse gradually, you might not necessarily be able to tell until one day it's all closing in on you. So yeah, there's also many factors too, obviously, like systemic factors
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
systemic poverty, racism. There are many, if somebody has a disability, if there's a language barrier,
Mm-hmm.
there are so many different overlapping challenges that might prevent somebody from leaving a bad situation.
Absolutely. So, Chioma, you've been very open on social media about your, story in regards to domestic violence. So, kind of piggying back off of Stephanie, oftentimes the person that we meet, that's not the same version that we get throughout time. Or on the flip side, sometimes we do get not the best version, but we kind of tell ourselves like it's okay, it'll get better. So, how did your relationship progress into an abusive one? Like what transpired from the beginning, middle to the end to where you said, okay, this is not a good situation.
Many things, but to make it as short and sweet as possible. To begin with, he had quite a prolific mask, right? He
Mm-hmm.
was a great masker. Like I told you a little earlier, I was in a very vulnerable place in life. I got married very young to my first husband,
Mm,
17, 18. We divorced early. I was only 22. So he met me at that spot, right out of a divorce. I
Mm-hmm.
got cheated on pretty badly. I have these fresh little babies, right? So I'm all over the place. I'm traveling, I'm in the club, working in the club. So I'm at this vibration, right? So that's where he met me. He's a basketball player. He has all these chains. He's in Atlanta. I'm like, oh, okay, I can get some money out of him. We could travel, yada, yada, yada. So it's
Mm-hmm.
also like the mindset, you know? Um, so the first sign, I say that the first thing that happened, very, very small compared to where it went, right? But from there, also being a nurse, I and a mom, I always have this mindset of I can fix it, I can fix this person, right? And just a
mm,
very forgiving person. So when the first thing did happen, he's apologetic. He's like, oh, well, this is why that happened. My mother did this and all these things. Everybody did everything to that person. And I need you to save me. I need you to be there for me. So that is where it started. And from there, I would say the trapping phase, within 3 months, I moved to his hometown across the country. Everything moves fast because it has to be a whirlwind for them. They have to put you in a whirlwind.
mm,
Move across the country. At that point, the first incident happens. Well, the first time I go unconscious, he chokes me out to that extent. I can't tell anybody because I've moved across the country and I told everybody to trust me. And I moved with my kids and I can't look like an idiot. So the progression, you kind of start to shell yourself, right? They get you away from your friends and family. I move across the country. So from there, it's kind of like the ball is in their court. They can do whatever.
So, Rosa, so the CDC states that over 40% of black women experience violence from a partner during their lifetime. Now, the majority of the violence stems from intraracial relationships. So as black on black, white on white, things of that nature. So, what are some factors that cause violence in some black men?
So I want to start this conversation with the black community is not inherently violent.
Mhm.
And black men are not inherently violent. We have to look at this domestic violence as a form of oppression. And I like to define it first, right?
Mhm.
Domestic violence is a coercive pattern of behaviors to gain and maintain control over your partner. So when we look at it from an oppression lens, right? When systemic racism rips us away from our power, right? We have none. But in the black community, right? And I know a lot of advocates don't like me to say male privilege applies to black men. It does.
Mhm.
They're raised in that patriarchy and socialized to obtain this power, obtain this leadership, right? So what happens in our community is our men are stripped of their power, but where can they gain it? Black women and children, and also in the queer community, right? So we're not inherently violent. That's a myth. And also in our communities, we're known for trying to resolve issues ourselves. We don't want to involve systems. We don't want to involve law enforcement. We do fear that our men will get arrested and killed, right? So that's why those numbers look so high with concurrent race with us. Congruent race with us because of those factors. It's not just the violence is years of oppression, is we are descendants of the enslaved, we have internal trauma already out of the womb, and those factors have our numbers very high.
So, okay, so to piggyback off of
I
that
said a
one,
lot.
yeah, no, I just so okay. So, do you believe that this issue of femicide, because it is an ongoing, a very strong ongoing issue currently going on, right? Is it? Do you think it's race based or gender based?
So let me go to the World Health Organization and define femicide first in a really simple way.
Okay.
Femicide is being murdered or killed because you are a woman, right? Gender based. It's you are a woman, and I want to say in America we don't have that charge, but I compare it to if you are murdered because you're queer, murdered because you're black. A hate crime charge is initiated, correct? So that's femicide. And throughout the world, as you can see, specifically in Mexico was highlighted a couple of years ago, femicide is because you're a woman. It's not necessarily race-based, but still in this country, more black women experience femicide than any. And femicide also includes trans women who are transitioning, but we do experience that. And I can go into black feminist theory, black standpoint theory to understand why we as black women experience it as the highest rate, because remember, we were the help. Remember, we were the sapphire, the mammy, all of these things, all of these stereotypes. So that's why it's so high within black women.
So so we can touch on that just a little bit, we went on time crunch, but just a little bit, because so I have with my educational background, I got my bachelor's degree in English from Georgia State University, and then I received my master's in American Studies from Kansas State University.
Yeah.
So we on similar pages. So I just want to touch on that black feminist theory for a quick second, because yes, it is true that back in enslavement days that we were considered the mammies, the house help, right, the backbone. So how do you think that's still how do we currently see that in present day?
In present day, just the case that's going on right now with a 13-year-old mother shot the 20-year-old and murdered him under her bed.
I heard about that in Memphis, I believe.
And what is the internet saying? She's fast.
They're blaming the girl.
Blaming the girl, yeah.
That's the Jezebel character. Because we know if that was a white girl, empathy, the parent was justified, but because it's a black girl and a black woman, she's a Jezebel. She was just fast. And let's bring in misogyny, right? If that was a black man who murdered that 20-year-old, he would be congratulated because he's protecting his daughter. That protection of violence. So that is showing up in monitored. I just thought about that. That's recently going on, and that is the perfect example for that question.
So Chioma, in your previous answer, you mentioned something. So you said that with your previous partner, right? One of the manipulation tactics that he would use is, basically the whole world is against me. Like, are you going to believe like everyone else? So what other soft or hard manipulation tactics did you have to go throughout your relationship?
Triangulation, like I said, most abusive people are also cheaters because cheating is a form of abuse. Okay, so a lot of triangulation. Within that relationship, I got diagnosed with lupus. So I'm also a huge lupus advocate. As we know, or as we can tie in being in constant fight or flight, having your neurological system always stressed is also a precursor or a risk factor to lupus. So while in this relationship, I then got diagnosed, which made me weaker, right? So usually I stand around 163 pounds. Within this relationship, I was about 130. I was losing weight. I was sick. I went through a high risk pregnancy. He's like, you can't do this by yourself. I was seeing 4 doctors a week. I couldn't work. I was getting blood transfusions. All while this man is still beating me to the point where I went into labor with 2 black eyes, into labor, to the hospital, eyes shut, right? So I felt as though, what am I going to do? how am I going to work, right? I've always been hyper independent, but how will I do that with Lupus, with the baby, with the other kids? How will I make money? He had made it so that I was so financially dependent on him. Every job I would have to quit, or I would get fired in that time frame because I can't go into work the next day with a black eye, right? I can't. How am I going to do that? Or he would take my car. He would steal my car from the house so that I would miss the shift, right? So he would make it nearly impossible for me to stand up on my own 2 feet. So that was a big way. A lot of financial abuse. Obviously, with the physical came the emotional, came the mental. So just talking down to me, you can't make it by yourself no more. Nobody's gonna want you with 3 kids. All of that, rhetoric. Nobody's here for you. Your mom's in Saudi Arabia. She doesn't care about you. Your dad don't care about you. Nobody cares about you. So
So as Rosa previously mentioned, when we talk about Black feminist theory, we talk about things that have transpired throughout many decades with Black women, right? Many people would ask the question, so you went through all of this, however you stayed. So what made you want to remain in that environment even though it was very detrimental not only to your mental but to your physical? Like, did you feel from society, right, when we see things like, in our culture, like, I'm going to hold my man down, or like, hey, we go through our ups and downs but that's still my man at the end of the day? Do you feel like the rhetoric that's very prevalent in our community was added on to the factor of you staying in a relationship that was not good for you?
I want to say this: people have a misconception about domestic violence or being in that kind of relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Every day is not you getting beat down, right? We would go out the country. We would go on trips. I had Louis bags. I had YSL purses. I lived in a 4,800 square foot home. I had a fresh BMW X5, right? So within all of that, every single time this person's doing something, whether it's the cheating, whether it's the physical abuse, he would come back with something physical. It was a new diamond chain. It was, whatever it was.
Mm.
But it was not just, I'm going to hit you and then I'm going to run out the door and then I'm going to come back and just say sorry. No, there was a physicality to it. It was a something that was enticing. And also, I was young. The entire relationship, I was still in my
Mm.
early 20s. So I'm like, okay, he can get better. He comes. I talked to a therapist. I'm going to go see this therapist this day. So it was very much a flip flop. And then also another factor into that is the role that it plays on your mental health. Being in a physically abusive relationship, it can almost be treated as being dependent on a drug, right? So like cocaine, your brain starts to get altered. So at that point, my body, my brain is now addicted to that cycle of abuse, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I might think I'm in control, but I'm no longer in control, right? My body is now wanting that familiar trauma, right? As opposed
Mm.
to an unknown peace, right? So maybe I think that I do want that peace. I want to get out of here, but that is more scary at this point than the familiar abuse, So there's so many different factors that the public doesn't play in
Mhm.
because they don't go to nursing school. They're not psychologists. They don't go get their master's in psychology. They don't
Yeah.
necessarily know. All they see is this stupid woman that keeps going back to this bad man.
So Stephanie, with your line of work, so how common is how like can you talk about how common assault occurs in relationships, especially with the amount of women, and you see children as well, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, on a weekly basis.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. It's domestic violence and intimate partner violence is a lot more common than people think.
Mm-hmm.
The stats show that about 1 in 3 women will experience some form of abuse, whether that's sexual, psychological, or physical, or a combination of the three. And it's something like 1 in 4 men have also experienced some form of abuse.
Yeah.
And so we do see that it's very common. I'll just speak like personally from personal experience. Like every woman I know has a story,
Mm.
pretty much. But yeah, we have a 32 bed safe house, and we serve approximately 9,000 individuals a year, and that's including children.
Wow. So can you break that down monthly? So how many women and children on average does the shelter take in monthly?
It does fluctuate,
Yeah.
but we do our very best to keep the safe house fully occupied. So I'd say about 30, even though generally people stay at our safe house for about 90 days. So it's, 30, 32 per 90 days. And then those survivors then have the option to go into our transitional housing program where there's an apartment community that we work with where we can help survivors get into that apartment and furnish with, furniture and that way they can still maintain a community. We really try to cultivate an environment of sisterhood because that feeling of isolation is something that comes up a lot, that feeling of being very alone when
Yeah.
it's like, no, you're not alone. In
Yeah.
fact, there's a lot of people who've been through similar situations.
Absolutely. And when you speak on isolation, which can absolutely affect your mental, and we speak on mental health. So there's a core. Many people don't realize this, but there's a correlation between lust and domestic violence. So absolutely, you can still be in a relationship and still get sexually abused. Now I know Chioma, you mentioned something previously when you said that not when you think about domestic violence, you're not getting physically abused every single day. There are different forms of abuse. So, Rosa, can you please talk about, how does lust play a part in preventing abuse victims from leaving? And talk about, how prevalent, sexual abuse occurs in many domestic violence cases.
So there are many different forms of domestic violence. We always see
Mm-hmm.
that physical, right? That's what the tip of the iceberg, because the iceberg is bigger at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
That physical violence is what everyone sees first, right? And they think that that's the only thing that's domestic violence, but it's not. We have economic abuse, we have emotional, people use children, but let's specifically talk about sexual violence
Mm-hmm.
and understand under this lens, if you are married, the victim blaming behind that. You're married. What do you mean you were sexually assaulted in your marriage, right? So sexual assault is prevalent because that is one of the most shameful acts in domestic violence. From my experience in listening to survivors, because the sexual acts are so pervasive that survivors don't want to talk about that part of the abuse. So you stay because specifically if that abuser records it, if they take pictures, threatens to send it to your family, your job, and all these other things. That's why it's so pervasive. A survivor will not talk about that part of the abuse. Even the survivors who come into safe house, they tend to leave out
Leave
how
that part out.
pervasive
Yeah.
how pervasive that part is.
Yeah. So Rosa, Chioma, did you experience any type of sexual violence throughout the duration of your relationship?
Yes, like she said, um, I would say that this is first personal opinion, right? And this is not anything scientific. I
Mm-hmm.
genuinely believe that most of them have some kind of many deep rooted mental issues, right? And so that kind of goes into how they are sexually. My abuser did get diagnosed with MPD and a few other things, but on the surface, he is a diagnosed narcissist. So he has very little self esteem. As we know, narcissists are actually very small on the inside, right? And that's why they play this grandiose person. With that, he triangulated me sexually with other women. So, oh, well, this lady, it ended up coming out that he was having like threesomes with people, all this stuff. And so the women would throw that in my face like, well, you can't. They would message me from different pages. Well, I was just sucking him, up last night, and you
Wow.
can't please him this way, and that's why he's going to leave you and that baby. Just all of that. They would send me pictures of it. um, and he would compare the things that those women do for him and say that is why he's cheating on me, because I won't do those things for
Wow.
him, right? Because I was kind of, I guess someone would say, prude, right? I didn't like all of that. And he would cheat on me with strippers and a lot of like sex workers, right? And so they were used to those kind of things. They were fine with the different types of sex. I'm not going to say the kinds, but they were cool with that. And I wasn't. And he would use that against me. So he was very lustful, very deviant, and he would find people. that were just as deviant and then triangulate me with those people.
Yeah, and that's a not only is that a terrible form of manipulation, but this goes into another topic that a lot of people don't really understand the nuances of lust, and it's especially how that plays a part in many DV relationships. So, Rosa, can you please define first of all what rape is, and then I'm gonna go into the next part of the question.
So the simple definition of rape is any type of penetration, any type of touch, any type of intimacy without consent.
Mm-hmm.
And we are taught no means no.
Mm-hmm.
I don't teach that at all. I stopped teaching that like 10 years ago. I teach youth and college students yes means yes. If you don't get a defined yes, then you need to stop, right? Because what's been happening with the no means no type concept, well, she never said no, so I just kept going.
Mm-hmm. And yeah.
I mean,
shouldn't laugh at that, but
I
that's
know.
so real.
No, I shouldn't laugh at it. It's very
real.
pervasive. It's like
real.
that's
It's
why
very
I
real.
had to stop saying that. Like, you need to hear a defined yes.
And I asked that question because I know many people, their definition of rape is just, oh yeah, a woman is running down the street and a man just like forces himself
Hollywood.
on
Like
her.
Hollywood.
Yeah, and many
SVD.
people, and many people don't understand well, if you don't do it, another person will do it. Many people don't understand what coercion is. They don't understand, the depths of manipulation. So that's the main reason why I asked that, because the part two of that question, Rosa. So when we talk about a sexual assault in relationships, right? So can you talk about the different factors that are associated with rape? Because I know I named two, manipulation, coercion, and the yes means yes thing. So can you just elaborate further on that, because many people don't know. They don't. So because I know, for example, too, like let's say you're in the act and you see your partner's literally screaming in pain, right? But you still decide to just keep going for your pleasure. That also falls underneath sexual assault. So could you please just go under, just talk about the nuances of that? Because a lot of people don't know. And we got to clear the air. There's a lot going on.
So, first thing I want to say, you're most likely to be sexually assaulted by someone you know or in your close circle.
Yeah.
It is not this movie that plays someone running in the park and you have all these injuries. That is not, those things happen, but it's maybe 1 or 2%. So most likely it's someone you know. And number two, what people don't understand is that consent, that yes isn't blanket to every act, right? So when we get really tedious about it, you do need to get consent for every act, right? It reminds me, this is gonna hit a sour button with the Kobe Bryant sexual assault case. I know he's our RIP. I don't have nothing against him, but the confusion about that case is that she said yes to vaginal sex and no to anal sex. That's what that case was about. And it's about having a blanket consent. So if someone, I want to talk about that, because that is what's getting a lot of people in trouble around sexual assault, rape. And also I want to say in statute, let me tell you why the difference between rape and sexual assault when it comes to criminal charges. Rape is a life sentence. Sexual assault and sexual battery is not. But in the state of Georgia, the statute is designed that only a woman can get raped, because the statute says it has to be vaginal penetration from a penis, right? And that, yeah, so I always bring awareness to that, because we need to, start lobbying and start saying like we need to adjust that statute. But that is also the freeze, right? We have fight, flight, and freeze. Sometimes and fawn, like the compliance of it. Yes, fawn. You will see someone being compliant with the sexual act to get it over with.
Yeah.
But they did not consent. They was like, if I do this, it'll get it over with very quickly. I see that a lot in DV relationships.
If I don't let him do this, it's going to be worse.
Yeah.
The alternative is worse somehow.
Yeah, and the freeze is just like they didn't do anything at all.
Yeah.
It's still not consent. They just laying there.
It's your brain trying to keep you safe.
Right. And also drugs and alcohol play a part in, it's a real bad coercion. in manipulation when drugs and alcohol are involved,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
because we both were drunk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are some factors beyond just saying no.
Yeah. So okay, so Chioma, what was the last straw for you to leave the relationship?
My last straw was definitely my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I kind of talked to previous to us getting on air, I spoke about a lot of different times where CPS did end up getting involved in our household, which prior to meeting him, I've never had CPS in my life, not even as a kid. My mom was a great mother. So I've never had them in my life. But when you talk about trying to co-parent with him afterwards, and he kidnapped our son, and we had a Amber Alert. He actually beat me up, threw me out the car, threw me outside the hospital, and then he fled with our son and said that he was going to go kill the baby, right? So that led a statewide Amber Alert. They did end up finding him. They got the baby. But what the state told me in our hearing, because they would not give me my child back, right? So they told me was, and this was in Alabama, if I can't protect myself, how can I protect this baby, right? So now everybody's looking at
Oh
me
my
like,
God.
you can't get him to stop hitting you. So how are you going to make sure that he does not flee with these kids and murder them? We know that we have family annihilators that exist. So how are we going to protect the kids? So after they told me that, and they did grant the protective orders over me and all the kids, I was not then mandated to co-parent with him. Previous to that event, the state in Alabama did tell me I was still mandated to co-parent with him, even though we had all of these DV cases going on. His name's on the birth certificate, so that was a really hard back and forth for me. After that happened, and I was in Atlanta, I was actually living in Atlanta after during that time. Um, they allowed for me not to have the co-parent with him, and that definitely helped me kind of separate myself from the situation. So a lot of getting away for me was saving my kids. As you know, the last incident with him was my 4-year-old at the time. He's 8 now. He ended up having to stab him, my ex, in the leg to get him, because my ex was 6'5". I'm 5'3". So my 4-year-old was around his legs height. And so he was stabbing him with a butter knife as he was choking me unconscious. And his kids were there, my kids were there. They heard me screaming. They could see him flipping me back and forth, choking me, punching me, flipping me. And I'm tiny. I'm 135 pounds, 5'3". And so at this point, he's choking me, 4-year-old stabbing him, and my then 6-year-old pinged the house, the address to the house, and was calling the cops. So by the time I came to, the cops were already there taking him out the house. So that is actually how I left that house in Alabama. He was arrested. Within 24 hours, I had the whole house cleared out and I was headed to Georgia. Um, and then the next 6 months was him stalking me in Georgia, and that's how he got the 3 felony cases. So in Georgia, but I think that as a domestic violence survivor, right, you have to look outside of yourself for strength. I left for the babies. I left for my sister. She told me, I don't want to bury you. But at that point, there was no more love for myself. All the love was external. I love my kids more than I love myself, you know? So all for the babies.
So were you familiar with domestic violence resources?
I will say this. I had so many angels throughout the process of getting out of that. Every time you're choked and it's reported, mind you, this whole relationship, I had never called the police. It was always somebody else. I was always trying to protect him. It was always somebody else that called the police, which is very common, right? Like Miss Rose said earlier, as Black women, we're always trying to protect the Black man. So I never wanted to be the one that called the police. But when they were called and you worked with the state, the DAs in different places, you always had a DV advocate. And I've had plenty of DV advocates that have helped me more than my mother did, got me the resources, put me up in hotels, they used to give me vouchers. I would go back to him, right? And they would give me these vouchers so that if something happened, I could flee to a hotel and it was paid for. So
Mm-hmm.
like those women, a lot of times were what saved me in the moment. So thank God for the DV advocates. Thank God for you guys. If it wasn't for these programs, if it wasn't for these homes, a lot more women would be passed away by now. So
Mm-hmm. So Stephanie, with your with your line of work, right? So how from for what you see on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis, how can women safely leave a domestic violence relationship? Because some, even though Chima was fortunate enough to have family support and things of that nature, her sister, but some women don't have it like that. So
Hmm.
what can one do to safely leave and get to a shelter?
That's a great question. Yeah, as we've discussed, like finances is often kind of a
That's
factor.
major, yeah.
So if you can't, break your deposit and pack up the kids and fly somewhere and then put down another security deposit for another apartment. Safety planning is key, and we have several 24/7 hotlines. So anytime we'll help safety plan with you. If anybody goes to our website, wrcdv.org,
Mm-hmm.
all of our hotlines are listed on our homepage. But one of the main things I would say is to move in silence. Don't announce your departure. Don't let him know, like, I'm leaving you. Plan your exit silently and, call resources who can kind of help you plan things out. Have like a hotel or somebody, like a landing place lined up. And another thing I'll say is when you're planning your exit, gather together your documents, your important documents, your birth certificate, your passport if you have it, any family valuables, your grandmother's precious ring, or anything that you don't want to lose. And yeah, I'd say get your community together and move in silence.
And something I also wanted to briefly
Mm.
touch on as well for those that are listening, because again, we talk about relationships, right? And it's common people say, the ups and the downs of relationships, or hey, through and through, I'm in this relationship. How is one supposed to know that, okay, I'm currently in an abusive relationship? Because sometimes abuse isn't always physical.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some stuff that people can look out for and to take heed and say, you know what, this is not right. I need to leave.
Yeah, there's definitely some red flags. I mean, in any case, like if you feel your world getting smaller, that's a sign. And it's difficult because psychological abuse makes you trust yourself less,
Mm-hmm.
And but I would say, just like what we heard about today, love bombing, you know, if somebody's telling you they love you after like 2 weeks, that's a red flag. Um, Put downs, gaslighting. If somebody's making you doubt your own reality, that's a red flag. Um, and just any instance where somebody's trying to control you. Digital boundaries, if somebody's asking for your location or your passwords or like trying to check up on your phone like that. This can be a sign that, somebody's trying to control your behavior. True, when somebody loves somebody, it's a mutual, equitable distribution of trust. But yeah, if somebody's trying to control your behavior or be controlling about your whereabouts, that's a red flag for sure.
I want to hyper focus on fast in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I
was
want
just
to
about
go
to say
back to
that
that
too.
very briefly.
Mm-hmm.
You
The love
meet,
bombing.
you are in love in a week, you move in a month, you have children within a month or two.
Mm.
Like, abusers move fast because by the time that first abusive incident happens, you're already in love with this person.
Mm-hmm.
It's already a misunderstanding, or you're already blaming yourself like, oh, I shouldn't have done X, Y, and Z
Mm-hmm.
because this is not the person I met. And many survivors spend their whole relationship 5, 10, 15 years trying to get back to that person they met.
Maybe if I change this about myself,
Right.
he'll love me like he used to. And your world gets smaller and smaller until you don't know who you are anymore.
Exactly. And you never see that person ever again
Right.
because the true person is standing right in front of you.
Mm-hmm. And also, Rosa, so there's something else too. I want to touch on because I know we pretty much covered like pretty much heterosexual relationships,
Mm.
but for non-heterosexual relationships, because abuse is also prevalent in those relationships as well. So I want to talk about something as well because when we talk about domestic violence, right? When we talk about women, also men as well. I've noticed that in a lot of those situations, the more masculine individual in the relationship, the butch women, right? They will try to emulate characteristics of men, but it's the hard characteristics. It's the not so good ones. So why is that prevalent in non-heterosexual relationships?
So let's start with masculinity and femininity being a social construct that
Mm-hmm.
is made up. Listen, it is made up, right? In society, and we're socialized in those made up worlds. So if I see a woman who is more masculine presenting, they're literally taking what they've seen and socialized to become that person, right? Because the social construct has a list of what you're supposed to be as a masculine person versus a feminine person. In our society here, masculinity means power, leadership. I am the provider. I have to maintain control of everything around me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, someone who's masculine presenting could pick up those characteristics when we also know masculinity is kind, masculinity is soft,
Mm-hmm.
masculinity is forgiving and loving. Those are the true characteristics of masculinity. Being there for their families, for their children, and showing up, not this made up stuff, hardcore negative attributes that, because in masculinity, you can only present anger.
Yeah.
Anger is the only viable emotion.
Mm.
So it goes a lot
Yeah.
deeper than that, but I feel like that's a good answer for right now,
Yeah.
where your viewers can understand where I'm going.
Yeah. And this leads me to my final question. So Chioma, so you're currently in a new relationship, and I wanted to ask, so how did you find the courage and the strength to give love a try again? And what are some, when dating, what are some stuff that you looked out for to make sure that, okay, I'm in a healthy relationship, this is how it's supposed to be?
Well, for one, moving extremely slow.
Mhm.
Going slow.
That
Yeah.
was my number one thing is like sussing the person out. Obviously, I've been outside of my past relationship for over 3 years now.
Mm.
And that first year, I was in a lot of therapy. I had two different therapists actually. I was diagnosed with CPTSD, PTSD. Um, Within my past relationship, it had gotten to the point where I was about to take, I actually started taking Zoloft, right? So I was on
Mm-hmm.
citrulline because he had convinced me that I was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I was at that point. I had no sense of reality anymore. Um, 2 weeks later, I took myself off of it. I'm a nurse. I'm like, this is not good. I know I'm not crazy. Like, he cannot convince me I'm crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I did was just did a lot of therapy that first year. And my number one goal with my therapist, and I say this to all women that I do talk to that are kind of in that initial phase, is that when you're looking for a therapist and you're telling them what you're trying to accomplish, in when we're talking about getting to a new relationship, making sure that you know the signs, right? Like, what is it that I can see in another person that I couldn't see before, right? Because the biggest thing is the distrust. I didn't trust myself or my own judgment for a
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
long time because I'm like, if I allowed myself to get with this person, who's to say I won't continue to do that, right? So finding the trust in myself, knowing how those people operate, understanding a person with NPD through and through, getting
Mm-hmm.
the knowledge about abuse and how their minds work. If you understand their mind, then you can kind of see people for who they are before they see you, right? And then of course, a genuine self of a sense of self love. As soon as I left him and I was like cognitive enough, to kind of function again. That's when I enrolled in my bridge program, right? I moved 2 states. I moved to Virginia first, Nashville, then to Dallas. I just kept moving. But I kept moving until I felt like I was done outrunning the situation. So now I've been in Dallas for 2 years. I got me and my children a home. I kind of settled myself first before I started looking for a person for myself. I got us a home. I got a new car. I went back to school. I did all these things to build myself. I got my hobbies back. I started skating again. I started hiking again. Like all those things that made me Chioma were important before I brought somebody else into my orbit, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and thank God I found this person that aligns with me, that wasn't there to dim everything I had gone through, but allowed me the space to continue healing, because this is a continuous thing. Even coming on this podcast, I was so nervous. I'm telling him about it. I'm like, I've never talked about it in this format. I've talked about it on my own platforms, but never in this type of format. And the only thing I had to say was, you're an advocate. We're all here advocating for you. You deserve to speak about the things that have happened, you
That's
know?
right.
But to all the women, do not think that you are what you've gone through and that you have to hide that, because women feel like, well, I can't tell the next person because they're going to abuse me in the same way. And that is not true. The
Nope.
person that is for you will see that, and they'll see that as your strength, not a determinant. They won't see you as broken. They'll see you
Right.
as strong. Mhm.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. And my final question to you, amazing ladies. So, what are some things that women moving forward, whoever's anyone that's been in a DV situation, how does one find the courage to move on, and what are some healthy boundaries to put in place for the next relationship? Like, how does one move on from such a traumatic situation?
You want to go first?
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking more along the lines of like when you start dating again, and ways to protect yourself when you're maybe emerging back into the dating world after something. Or even for young people listening, if you're kind of new to dating, um, meet that person in a public place. Don't go to his apartment for a first date. Maybe group dates are
Or second
fun.
date?
Yeah, or second date, exactly. Like, don't go to somebody, don't
Yeah.
go somewhere private, or like, you hear about like these alpine situations. Don't go to somebody, don't go on a date in the woods, on a hike. Like, go somewhere public.
So for me, I am going to do a personal piece,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because most of us in this work are in this work because of a reason, right? So no, I haven't had an intimate partner violence type of relationship, but I do have a series of videos on YouTube, and it's called a memoir of an all-American Black girl. And when your parent has MPD, it mimics the same as abusive relationships. So first in my journey, instead of saying moving on, I define it as moving forward. Because moving on can mean going backwards, forward, sideways, right? So for me, that was the first thing I did. I'm moving forward. Therapy, going through the grieving process, because when you come out of a domestic violence relationship, you're going to grieve that person you knew,
Yeah.
that person you saw, and the person who you know, in acceptance, right? So take those parts very seriously, and truly define how you want your quality of life to be.
Right.
And it's a lot of focus on self before you start dating, right?
Right.
Get your life in a place where it's like, I'm happy.
You know yourself,
Yeah.
your true, self.
Right.
Yeah.
So outside of the external support that Stephanie talks about, and red flags and such, you have to stabilize yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Comfortable, loving yourself unconditionally, flaws and all, and being able to move forward through any obstacle you encounter. Because economic abuse is detrimental,
Oh yeah.
and picking yourself up from nothing, that is the hardest thing I've had to do
Takes so much strength.
as an adult child, right? So yeah, those are some things I tell people when it's come time to move on. I make it personal. Just because I sit here as a PhD candidate doesn't mean I'm perfect. And never look at any anyone else as perfection. We are all imperfect people just trying to make it in this economy.
No, absolutely. I know, right? Yeah, right. So I want to close up. I just one last question. Okay, Rose. So I know your organization. I wanted you to briefly talk about the work that you've done throughout the past decade, helping Black women in need of shelter, educating them, and I know because you've also worked with like homicide cases as well. So I wanted you to just briefly tell the viewers that, and how people can reach you.
So Sania's Place started and opened in 2023, right? So I started my journey with specifically Black women in 2018 when I moved here, and I had to do anti-racism work at the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and I also had to see all of this data about how we're dying at the highest rates, because I didn't address that in Florida when I was doing the work in 2012. So from 2008 until now, the biggest part of my advocacy is educating the community. When I'm on that stand testifying as an expert, I am speaking for someone who is no longer with us. And if that person is a woman of color, I tend to inform the jury about systems a lot and why that victim or survivor or thriver, whomever, how you want to identify, did not, their encounterment with those systems, or why they did not those systems. I also still do one-on-one advocacy, right? I still do personal advocacy. I let Black women know that this is why, the factors of what happened to you is so volatile. You are not alone. The biggest thing with domestic violence and sexual violence is you're not alone, right? And I also, get Black women to specific organizations, like the Black Women's Wellness Clinic, that's one of them, to address not only just the abuse, the violations of boundaries, but also the racism and the oppression that comes along with seeking help.
That's amazing. Well, I don't know about y'all, but I need a part 2 because this topic is very, very dense. I didn't get to cover all stuff I wanted to cover, but that's okay. Part 2 is coming soon. I wanted to thank you all individually so much. Chioma, thank you so much for telling your story. I know definitely it was not easy, but just know that not only have you helped out so many other women, but just by you also telling your story as well, I've learned so much. So I just wanted to personally thank you. Rosa, Stephanie, thank you so much for your time as well.
Thank you.
Thank you for just the amazing resources that you've shared. And I just want to just thank you guys so much. So you can follow Rosa on all social media platforms at...
So on Instagram, you can follow me at MissJames_4. And also Sania's Place at Sania's Place, SAINYHA Place. You can also follow me on YouTube at a memoir of an all-American Black girl. You can follow me there. You can see some videos and things of my thoughts there, but those are the pretty much where you can find me as far as information about domestic violence and sexual violence.
And you can follow Stephanie at...
Yes, well, definitely follow the Women's Resource Center. If not for yourself, maybe somebody you know, but our website, wrcdv.org. Follow us on Instagram at wrcdv. And if you're interested in volunteering with us, you can email me at volunteer@wrcdv.org.
Yes. And you can follow Chioma on all social media platforms at...
The pretty nurse _Chi. And I just speak about my own experience, and I love to speak to the girls when they just need somebody to talk to. They need some motivation. They always want to know, how did I make it this far? And I will literally walk you through the steps of how to rebuild your life after surviving and thriving.
Yes. Awesome. And you can follow us on all social media platforms at From the Block Podcast. Thank you guys so much. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye everyone.
Thank you.